when a broke fisherman pulls a mysterious woman from a sinking yacht. He has no idea she's the daughter of a billionaire. What begins as a rescue turns into a tidal wave of secrets, love, and a fight against the odds that could change both their worlds forever. The sky over the coastal village of Millionaire was a turbulent canvas, smeared with a charcoal gray of heavy cloud and streaked with a fiery orange of a sun, surrendering to horizon. Far out on the water, lightning flickered silently, a prelude to the violence brewing. Rowan Cade, a fisherman whose life felt as worn and patched as his late father's aging trawler, the Tern, watched the approaching storm with eyes narrowed by years of reading the sea's moods. Survival in Millionaire was a constant battle against dwindling catches and the encroaching tide of resort developments that had swallowed the old fishing docks of his youth. Rowan wasn't just broke. He felt invisible. The fisheries that once sustained the town had thinned dramatically, pushing families like his to the margins. Tourism had boomed, replacing weathered fishing shacks with gleaming high-rise condos and noisy souvenir shops. He and others like him became ghosts haunting the edges of their own hometown, their livelihoods relics of a bygone era. He navigated familiar waters, the groan of the Tern's hull a constant companion, his existence measured in knots and nets, and the gnawing worry of unpaid bills stacked on a small galley table. As he hauled in the day's final net, a disappointingly meager catch of flounder and cod, the old marine radio crackled to life, cutting to the rising howl of the wind. Static gave way to a panicked voice, young and female. Mayday, Mayday, vessel ad Astra. Taking on water, repeat. Taking on water coordinates. The numbers that followed placed the vessel miles off the coast, perilously close to Blacktooth Reef, a treacherous stretch known for tearing hulls apart even in calm weather. No pleasure yacht had business being there, especially not with storm like this rolling in. Rowan paused, the net forgotten in his hands. The coordinates echoed in his mind, a long run, straight into the teeth of the storm. Helping would burn precious fuel, diesel he could barely afford, money needed for engine parts, and overdue mooring fees. Doubt gnawed at him. Yet, the raw fear in that voice, the tremor beneath the clipped words, struck a chord deep within him. It wasn't just distress, it was sheer terror. He thought his own father, lost at sea years ago, and the unspoken code of the water. You don't leave someone behind. Gritting his teeth against the cost, against the rising wind that whipped spray across his face, Rowan spun the wheel. The Tern, sturdy despite her age, turned her bow away from the relative safety of the harbor and charged toward the darkening horizon, toward the storm and the stranger lost within it. He found her hours later, amidst the splintered remains of what had clearly been a vessel of staggering luxury. The yacht ad Astra was already more than half submerged, its sleek lines broken, succumbing to the relentless assault of the waves. A lone figure clung desperately to a piece of floating wreckage, barely visible in the tumultuous spray and fading light. She wore a tattered high-end life jacket, clearly inadequate for conditions, her body racked with tremors from cold and shock. Rowan maneuvered the Tern as close as he dared, the trawler pitching violently. He cut the engine momentarily to avoid swamping her further. "Grab the line," he yelled over the storm's roar, tossing a thick rope expertly toward her. Her frozen fingers fumbled before finding purchase. With a strength born of necessity, Rowan hauled her to the churning water and onto the relative safety of his deck. She collapsed, coughing salt water, her breath coming in ragged gasps. He pulled her under the meager shelter of the wheelhouse overhang, draping a rough, oil-smelling blanket over her shivering shoulders. "Name?" he asked gruffly, his voice tight with the strain of the rescue and the ongoing battle against the elements. "Mara," she whispered, her voice hoarse, barely audible above the wind. "Mara Eldon." She offered nothing more, her eyes wide with lingering fear, scanning the unforgiving sea as if expecting it to swallow her whole again. Rowan didn't press. The storm demanded their full attention, a symphony of howling wind and lashing rain that conveniently masked the sound of the girl's quiet, shuddering sobs as the reality of her ordeal set in. They rode out the worst of it side by side in a tense silence, two strangers united by chaos and the creaking timbers of the old boat. When dawn finally broke, it painted the sky in bruised purples and soft pinks, revealing a sea that was bruised but calming. The immediate danger had passed, but Mara remained an enigma. She carried herself with an unconscious air of privilege. Her hands, though scraped, bore the remnants of professional manicure. Her speech was precise and educated. Yet, she insisted on helping Rowan as he worked to assess the storm's damage to the turn. She learned quickly, helping him clean seaweed and debris from the deck, carefully coiling ropes, and even assisting with a makeshift repair to a broken pulley, her movements initially hesitant but growing more confident. Stranded for the next few days by the lingering swell and a stubbornly malfunctioning engine part Rowan needed to fabricate, an unexpected dynamic emerged. Mara surprised him with her knowledge. She spoke intelligently about the local impact of algae blooms they spotted, new details about coral migration patterns Rowan had only vaguely heard discussed, and even quoted recent marine conservation studies. She worked without complaint, her initial fragility giving way to a quiet determination. More surprisingly, she listened, truly listened, as Rowan, finding an unexpected confidant, slowly opened up about losing his parents, the slow, painful decline of Windmere, and how the unpredictable, often harsh sea was the only constant, the only thing left that felt truly real in his changing world. A fragile connection began to form in the shared isolation, adrift both literally and figuratively. As the turn finally limped back toward the familiar, weather-beaten docks of Windmere under a clearing sky, Rowan felt a tentative sense of relief, maybe even cautious optimism about the strange bond formed at sea. That feeling shattered the moment they rounded the breakwater. Instead of the usual quiet morning activity, the pier was swarming. Flashing lights from police cruisers bounced off the water, and a cluster of shouting reporters surged forward, microphones and cameras thrust aggressively towards his boat. Mara froze beside him on the deck, her eyes wide with a dawning horror that had nothing to do with the storm. Pushing through the throng with an air of impatient authority came a tall man, his jaws sharp, his suit impeccably tailored and utterly out of place among the fishing gear and salt-stained wood. He radiated wealth and barely concealed annoyance. "Mara," the man snapped, his voice cutting through the clamor. He reached the edge of the pier, his gaze sweeping over her disheveled appearance with disapproval before quickly masking it. "Do you have any idea of the chaos you caused?" He barely glanced at Rowan, dismissing him as part of the scenery. Before Mara could respond, the man swiftly wrapped a luxurious cashmere coat around her shoulders, shielding her as much from the prying eyes as the lingering chill. The camera shutters went into a frenzy. Headlines were already forming in the reporters' minds. Shouted questions filling the air. "Ms. Eldon, where have you been? Were you held captive? What happened to the Ad Astra?" Rowan stared, numb with disbelief. He recognized the name now, piecing together fragments of news reports he'd half ignored over the past week. Mara Eldon wasn't just any wealthy young woman. She was Mara Eldon, the sole daughter and heir of Julian Eldon, the reclusive titan behind the Eldon shipping conglomerate, one of the richest and most powerful men in the hemisphere. She had vanished from her family's yacht 5 days ago, sparking a massive, highly publicized search. Rowan, the invisible fisherman from a dying town, had unwittingly rescued one of the most sought-after missing persons in the country. Later, after the sharp-suited man, introduced curtly as Silas, head of Eldon Security, had whisked Mara away in a black sedan, leaving Rowan alone amidst the lingering reporters and bewildered locals, he found her waiting for him near the end of the now-quiet pier. The cashmere coat looked alien against the rustic backdrop. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rowan asked, the words rough, laced with confusion that tasted like betrayal. He felt foolish, used. Mara looked down at her hands, then met his gaze, her eyes pleading for understanding. "Because out there," she gestured vaguely toward the sea, "with you on the turn, I wasn't Julian Eldon's daughter. I wasn't an heiress trapped in a life I didn't choose. I was just Mara." Her voice trembled slightly. For the first time, maybe ever, I felt like I actually belonged somewhere. Like I was just me. But the explanation, heartfelt as it was, hung heavy in the air. The real world, with its flashing cameras, corporate security, and billion-dollar legacies, had crashed ashore, and the fragile connection forged in the storm felt suddenly, irrevocably altered. Mara was swept back into the gilded cage of her life in Eldon City, a world of sterile marble towers, hushed boardrooms, and suffocating expectations. Her face, now splashed across every news screen and magazine cover, became synonymous with miracle rescue and heiress ordeal. Speculation ran wild, but she gave no interviews, spoke to no media outlets, retreating into a silence that frustrated the press and worried her handlers. At home, within the opulent penthouse overlooking the city, her father, Julian Eldon, demanded answers. His voice, usually measured and controlled, held a rare edge of anger and frustration. He spoke of responsibility, of reputation, of the disruption she had caused. Mara listened impassive, until finally stating with quiet finality, "I don't want this life, Father. None of it." The declaration hung between them, unresolved and unsettling. Weeks bled into a month. Back in Windermere, Rowan tried desperately to slip back into familiar rhythms of his life. He took the turnout, mended his nets, haggled over prices at the dwindling fish market. But the sea, once a solace, now felt different, haunted. Every creak of the boat's timbers seemed to whisper her name. The vast, empty horizon reminded him of the impossible distance between their worlds. The salt spray on his face felt like the tears she'd shed in the storm. He saw her in the determination of the seabirds fighting the wind, in the unexpected resilience of dune grasses reclaiming the sand. He tried to force the memory away, to bury it under routine and exhaustion, but it clung to him like the persistent damp sea air. Even the townsfolk looked at him differently, a flicker of curiosity or pity in their eyes. The fishermen who'd touched, however briefly, a world far removed from their own. Then, one rain-slicked afternoon, amidst the usual pile of junk mail and bills, lay a thick cream-colored envelope. It bore the seal of the prestigious Blue Haven Coastal Conservation Institute. Rowan almost tossed it aside, assuming it was another fundraising appeal. But something made him pause, perhaps the weight of the paper, or the unfamiliar elegance of the address. Inside, he found a formal invitation to their annual summit, a major event attracting scientists, policymakers, and environmental advocates. His breath caught. Listed among the guest speakers, scheduled to talk about the challenges facing traditional fishing communities in the face of environmental change, was his own name, Rowan Cade. He stared at it, bewildered. How? Why? Tucked at the bottom of the invitation, almost hidden, was a line handwritten in neat, familiar script. You said your voice didn't matter. Prove yourself wrong. M. The invitation felt like a lifeline tossed across an impossible ocean. It was a challenge, a dare, and perhaps a bridge back to a connection he couldn't forget. The Blue Haven Coastal Conservation Summit was an overwhelming affair, a whirlwind of scientific jargon, earnest policy debates, and networking among people in crisp suits and sensible outdoor wear. Rowan felt acutely out of place, his worn jeans and fisherman's sweater standing out amidst the polished attendees. He clutched his hastily scribbled notes, his stomach churning with nerves before his speaking slot. He found Mara not among the dignitaries or panelists, but down on a nearby beach section designated for a hands-on demonstration project. Gone were the designer clothes and the haunted look from a pier. Dressed in practical work boots, sturdy gloves, and weatherproof gear, she was immersed in coordinating a group of university students and local volunteers, cleaning up a minor but persistent oil seep near the shoreline. Her brow was furrowed in concentration as she directed the placement of absorbent booms, her movements efficient and focused. She looked up as he approached, a smear of mud on her cheek and a genuine, unguarded smile spread across her face, reaching her eyes. "Rowan," she said, her voice warm, carrying easily over the sound of the waves. "You came." Later, between sessions, they walked along the beach, the awkwardness dissipating faster than Rowan had expected. "I'm not here hiding or running away this time," Mara told him quietly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I realized after everything that just wanting a different life isn't enough. You have to build it. This," she gestured toward the cleanup crew, "working on real problems, trying to make a tangible difference. This feels right. I want to work with you, Rowan, on the things that matter. The things you talk about on the boat." Rowan hesitated, the chasm between their backgrounds still looming large in his mind. Her world was endowments and influence. His was nets and tides. But when they stood together later that day for his presentation, Mara unexpectedly joined him on stage to add context about how large-scale environmental policies impact small communities like Windmere. Something clicked. He spoke with a raw honesty about the struggles of fishermen facing changing ecosystems and economic pressures. Mara followed, speaking eloquently about the need for integrated solutions, bridging the gap between scientific research and local knowledge. They weren't just two people from different worlds who'd shared a traumatic experience. They were partners, discovering a powerful synergy in their shared purpose. Mara's return to Windmere wasn't easy. She was met with cautious curiosity, bordering on suspicion by some. Whispers followed her, the rich girl playing conservationist. Jokes were made about her trading Gucci for gumboots. But Mara stayed. She didn't just throw money at problems. She threw herself into the work. She helped organize funding for vital dock repairs, secured grants for local oyster bed restoration projects Rowan had long dreamed of, and poured her energy into transforming the aging, mostly idle turn into a floating classroom for local youth, teaching them about marine biology and sustainable practices. Challenges remained. Paparazzi occasionally descended, trying to dig up dirt or portray Rowan as a gold digger. Julian Eldon exerted pressure from afar, threatening financial consequences, clearly disapproving of his daughter's chosen path and companion. And Rowan, proud, stubborn, and sometimes overwhelmed by the sheer force of her world colliding with his, pushed her away more than once, doubting her commitment or his own place beside her. But each time, after the arguments and the setbacks, Mara came back. She sought him out on the docks, met his frustration with quiet persistence, and reminded him of the work they still had to do, together. Her resilience chipped away at his defenses, proving her commitment wasn't fleeting. Years flowed by like the tides in Windmere Harbor, pulling seasons in and out, slowly reshaping the coastline and the community. People started talking differently about Mara Eldon. They no longer whispered about the billionaire's daughter who'd slummed it after a boating accident. Instead, they spoke of the woman who helped revive the oyster beds, who championed sustainable fishing practices that gave local families a future, the driving force behind a youth marine program that had instilled a new generation with respect for the sea. They'd point to the cleaner waters, the repaired infrastructure, the renewed sense of community pride, and acknowledge her role. They'd also talk with a grudging respect that had replaced early skepticism about how that quiet, stubborn fisherman, Rowan Cade, had somehow anchored her there, grounding her passion with his deep, lived understanding of the ocean and its people. For Rowan and Mara, however, the narrative wasn't about saving coasts or changing minds, though those things happened. The truth, lived day by day, was simpler and more profound. They had found each other adrift in their own personal storms. He lost in economic hardship and invisibility. She lost in a gilded cage of expectation. The dramatic rescue was just the beginning. The real journey was navigating the choppy waters of their vastly different backgrounds, learning to communicate across the divides of wealth and experience, and weathering the inevitable squalls caused by external pressures and internal doubts. Their life wasn't a fairy tale. It was built on shared work aboard the Tern, now as much a classroom and research vessel as a fishing boat, on long evenings debating conservation strategies over simple dinners, on quiet moments watching sunsets paint the sky above the harbor, on the arguments followed by the hard-won understanding. They built a partnership founded not on fleeting romance or unequal status, but on mutual respect, a shared commitment to the rugged coastline they both loved, and a bond forged in crisis and tempered by time and shared effort. They had met in the chaos of a storm, two souls lost in different ways. And as the years passed and the tides turned, bringing both challenges and triumphs, they realized the rescue had never truly ended. They were continually saving each other, reminding one another their purpose, their strength, their shared heart. Their love, much like the sea itself, was powerful, sometimes turbulent, but ultimately enduring. It hadn't asked for permission from society or family. It had only demanded the courage to hold on together. And so, from the fury of a stormy sea to the quiet calm of deep understanding, Rowan Cade and Mara Eldon proved that love isn't about where you come from or the circumstances that throw you together. It's about finding common ground, sharing a vision, and having the courage to fight for what truly matters together. They didn't just find love. They built a life, piece by piece, wave by wave, anchored not by wealth or status, but by shared purpose, mutual respect, an unbreakable bond capable of weathering any tide that life threw their way. Because sometimes the greatest rescue isn't from the churning ocean or a life you didn't choose. Sometimes the greatest rescue is of the heart. If this story of resilience, unexpected connections, and love defying the odds resonated with you, please consider hitting that like button and sharing this video with someone who might need a little inspiration today. And if you're drawn to powerful tales like this one, stories that explore the depths of the human spirit, the complexities of romance, and the possibility of redemption, make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell. There's always another journey waiting on the horizon, and we'd be honored to have you join us for it. See you in the next story.